or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, or that we should be shortly. In any case, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter @Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk, whichever works best for you, just let me know, because we'll keep being up there and in all the ways that we need to in order to continue our mission, having live local talk radio here in the Borderland, because no one is going to talk about the issues the way we do, as we already have Ida Beza-Gardner chiming in over there. Do appreciate it. Hello to you as well. We're taking comments throughout the show as we usually do over there. Phone lines open a little bit later. Another packed docket for you all today, as has... I can't think of a time when that hasn't been the case. And I'm not just saying we always find something to talk about, but there's always been pressing things to talk about that we really need to be delving into. And that's, of course, our focus. So just a few that we're picking out of the lineup for today. Of course, the immigration response continues to dominate in a lot of ways. New details out today about some more of those facts, some more of those figures, some more of the actions that are being taken by local levels of government, plus a very, kind of tragic in its own right, but glad it got resolved case involving kidnapping and extortion being resolved on El Paso roadways directly related to all of this. We'll delve into further on that, some pretty crazy details in that story, but also checking in, of course, with our news partners over at KFOX 14 on some of the big stories going on and some of the investigations into issues surrounding a lot of the issues that we have been discussing at length involved with this. So stay tuned for all of that. And of course, more detail on things such as, what's going on with firearms laws, those kind of changes already being sought in Texas specifically, including action being taken by the Texas government that might surprise you given other recent legislative actions that have happened. So whole lot more to come up here, and hope you're logged in and locked in with us in all the ways that we are. Should be up on all the social media now. So if we're not, find a different way. I don't know. You can't tell us if you can't see us. I'm remembering an old story from back in the severely pre-internet days, but before my time in being involved in broadcasting, media, etc., of the strictly analog days of some hapless news director who was not quite with the times just yet. In that case, that there had been a power outage of the broadcast at a station. And so the immediate knee-jerk response, if there's breaking news, put up a slide, of course, because at those points, they were essentially literally projectors, like at least when I grew up, what we had in our schoolrooms and classrooms. So I said, we're off the air, put up a slide so the viewers know, and just kind of not connecting those dots there of how they're going to know if we're off air. The slide, we're telling them we're off anyway. It gets circular logic real quick. So if you can find us, that's the reason we mention all the places we're at, so that you can continue to do so regardless of what your situation is. So let's dive straight into some of those. And yes, that in some cases has definitely been a refrain within some of my friends and family of, we're off the air, put up a slide, as a, did you really think about what we're actually going to be doing here? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that maybe you didn't. In any case, glad you're along with us here today. So let's dive right in on some of those issues here. We do, of course, have City Council approving an additional $4 million in contract extension to help address what is going on with migrants. We talked about that a bit. More comments coming in over on the social media. Feel free to exchange some contact information over there. And so we're looking at, again, City Council potentially approving those, again, roughly $10 million in total. We talked about that yesterday, but then, of course, we have the county of El Paso now looking at putting up that contractor-operated migrant center, according to El Paso Matters, the local nonprofit recording concern that specifically a Virginia-based company has been awarded at the Providencia Group and is going to be awarded that $6.9 million a year contract by El Paso County Commissioners Courts to set up staff and run the Migrant Support Services Center. And that center, again, according to El Paso Matters reporting on this, will be primarily to help coordinate travel arrangements for migrants with family and other sponsors across the United States waiting for them and the funds to get there. And one of our commenters there saying that truly hope that the Congresswoman Veronica Escobar gets those funds refunded by FEMA. Think that there's probably something that could be done there, though I think the application of those processes primarily fall on, the local officials, the local government officials, I should more clarify to say, because the city and the county, as they are going to need to stay on that and make sure it happens, I am sure that there is some further action that could be done, assistance, as it's often put, whenever it comes to congressional office. In which case, I'm also wondering what other parts of the congressional delegation might be able to help with in the region, because I know we often think about, just the Texas 16th congressional district, a lot of headlines and focus on that election coming up. But as we're going to be focusing on many different offices during this election, also maybe some of those other nearby ones, again, the Texas 23rd congressional district just to our east, and the New Mexico 2nd just to our north in New Mexico. And sure, there's our different states in one of those cases, but still working on making sure we focus on the response here. Would love to see coordination between all those offices on these things, though I've held my breath for, I guess, better or maybe longer chances. I'm not quite sure how to gauge it in this case here. In any case, that now grant, or rather contract, being awarded to that group, and this will be again for that service center, because essentially the federal resources still stemming out of that, still being overwhelmed in the area, not able to handle the total amounts. Not that they were ever really focused on this. This is providing other services. But again, the real way you can read all of the response that we've been seeing coming from our local area has been essentially along the lines of, while in some of the previous situations, particularly the whole Afghan situation, if you want to be more specific with that, there was resettlements, finding resources, those kind of things at play there, but also not really in the purview the way it was being handled there. There were some refugee resettlement agencies that were more involved in there, and I'm sure there was some, but not really primarily involving the local existing nonprofit microcosm of organizations that do a whole lot of work on, again, focus on primarily that, transporting them through and out of our region. I am sure that there are some potential resettlements or temporary accommodations being found, but for the most part, that's the focus, and that's what's still pretty much on deck, it does sound like. And that's, again, not something that even the federal resources in town, the agencies, Border Patrol, ICE, CBP, etc., were ever really focused on, because, well, there's processing and then saying, if it weren't for the existence of the local organizations, would have been good luck with the rest of it. So it's always been kind of that stopgap, that last mile solution, so to speak, as what the local organizations have doing. And so that's what the current situation is still, and governmental local response in any case is still focused on, is extending that and not much more. So as we also have Eric von Holstein-Rathlow chiming in, and thumbs up to you as well over on the social media. At least one other thing I want to mention here, a couple other big stories, including a city representative, Peter Sparsbein, going to be holding a community meeting on what has been going on with that. That meeting to be held today at 6 p.m., so immediately after the show, at 4801 Osborne Street. That's the West Side Regional Command Center, not too far from, say, Mesa and Crossroads, for those familiar with the area. So if you want to go check out that, might be a good way to get an idea. And again, a lot of money being approved for that from the city side as well. So with the couple of numbers, we're looking at about $17 million being either up for or being approved in the last couple of days, or at least being put on agendas, I guess would be a better way to put it, in terms of the local funding for the response to what is going on and what we've been having to deal with CBP coming out of it. James Holmes saying it would be a meaningful act, finally, I think, in response to the idea of making sure the reimbursements happen. So maybe a little bit of a jadedness in that statement. I think if I might say, I detect it. But again, making sure that this can continue on, because some of the estimates of how much it would cost, particularly given the estimate from the city out of about $250,000 per day being the sum total of the cost coming from, again, just the city side of things, that would amount to more than $90 million a year, $250,000 per day. If I misspoke earlier, $90 million per year if that were to keep a pace, which, yeah, not that any of this isn't sizable. I mean, if you want to go with the old half joke, million here, million there, you start talking real money, that really starts adding up for local budgets. But one other thing I want to mention before we hit that first break of the hour, that's, again, it's almost a bizarre situation, but tragic in its nature, of a migrant baby allegedly held for ransom found in El Paso during a traffic stop. Again, that's the headline from our news partners over there at KFOX 14. And that, again, the details coming out now. This traffic stop happened about 2 weeks ago on September 16th, when Texas Department of Public Safety state troopers pulled over 45-year-old Jenna Rourke of El Paso and accused, in the aftermath of the investigation, Rourke and a 15-year-old teen in her vehicle of smuggling migrants and traveling with an unidentified 18-month-old boy. DPS saying that the child is a migrant, was reportedly in poor health at the time, and released to Child Protective Services as to look fully identify and find family of the kid. And specifically, the FBI found out that information from St. Petersburg, Florida, about a mother whose baby was being held for ransom. And so now Rourke has been charged with smuggling of persons and aggravated kidnapping. And talking specifically, again, our news partners there with the West Texas Regional Director of DPS, Jose Sanchez, think it's an unthinkable situation to have your child kidnapped and held for ransom. DPS troopers and CID agents are specially trained in the interdiction for protection of children, gives them the skills to take action in these situations and save children from further harm, and saying that, yeah, specifically a kidnapping for ransom scheme going on. So, I mean, as much as we've been talking about some of the situations on our roads, including, of course, the bailouts or ditching of vehicles once presented by law enforcement situations we have been talking about, but also the other kind of similar things that sounds in this vein of the stash houses, things like that. None of this is fun, good, or should be tolerated by any amount, but this just, it feels like, takes it up to the next level of there actually being not just someone through our area being deposited here to be as they crossed immediately here, but the idea of this being a transnational across the country, I don't know, it just hits ever so slightly different here. More people chiming in, including the Horizon City News Service. A lot of emojis there. Appreciate that. Eric von Holstein-Rathlow saying, yeah, what's a few $1 million among friends? And another comment coming in saying, what happened to the money former President Trump owes our city? Who was responsible for that? Interesting question, but again, that's not one that I think could really be outside of maybe filing of a court case. I know that there were some briefs essentially filed because it wasn't actually the presidency, it wasn't the White House or any official government agency in charge of that funds or the remaining of it, of the roughly $500,000, 600,000 rather, in that vein, somewhere in between there. It was actually the campaign. So I think the only remedy, if that was truly to be followed up on, might be essentially a suit, not exactly a small claims court anymore at that point. In any case, we're going to go and take that first break of the hour here right now. You're, of course, tuned into Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM, and I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Coming out of this break, we will get into more of the issues, and again, talking with our news partners there at KFOX 14 about what is going on with some of the in-depth reporting, including, related to some of these situations, but also delving a little bit further into specifically with what illicit drugs, the drug smuggling, and not just passing through this area, but affecting those in it, what resources are available, and also some things involving the district attorney's office and investigations further into that situation. So stay tuned. A whole lot more Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Comments over on the social media, keep those going. We'll pop those up during the interview. Calls a little bit later in the show, as we usually do. In any case, stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break. You're on News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Crews on scene of a collision now at the intersection of Edgemere and Tierra Este. You could always use Joe Battle and Pebble Hills as alternates to avoid it. Got some road work going on. Delta northbound at Alameda. Looks like southbound left lane restricted as well at Alameda. That's due to road work in that area. I'm Ryan Levine, and I'm keeping an eye on your roadways.
This report is sponsored by the Mark Moss Show podcast.
Bitcoin's U.S. dollar valuation might be down, but the technology, progress, and adoption is moving forward at a blistering rate. I'm Mark Moss, helping you navigate the decentralized revolution. Listen to the Mark Moss Show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
From fuel injectors to intake valves to combustion chambers and beyond, your car's emission system takes a beating. It gets choked with baked-on carbon that affects your air-to-fuel ratio, slowing you down. You gotta keep it clean to get top performance, longer vehicle life, higher gas mileage, and to pass state emissions testing. Show your car some love with CRC Guaranteed to Pass Emission System Cleaner. Yep, guaranteed to pass. Strong language for a strong product. And here's some more. Double your money back if you don't pass. You know it's gotta work. It's on the shelf at your favorite auto parts store, so grab some today. Expensive? Heck no. Hard to use? Heck no. Effective? You bet. Try it once, and you'll add it to your car a few times a year to keep things rolling just right. CRC Guaranteed to Pass Emission System Cleaner. Look for the box.
A construction site is a noisy place where things can be misinterpreted. We need to redo the drywall. It can sound a lot like,
rewire the hull? They're firing, Paul.
wait, what did I do? Or even,
install a waterfall. Whose dumb idea was this?
be on the same page at every stage with Autodesk. From the designers to the field crew to the owner of the finished building. Autodesk Construction Cloud gives everyone clarity. Now, how about that drywall?
You want to be a showstopper like The Miz? You want to be awesome? Then you'll want to have a game plan. Whether you're a champion or a bettor, you got to be responsible. The DraftKings Sportsbook offers all the tools you need. You can set a realistic budget and bet within your means. You can set time, deposit, and wager limits so you can have a personal game plan for having fun while being responsible. I practice safe bets, and so should you. Visit DraftKings.com/responsible-gaming to learn about all these tools and more.
Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/responsible gaming for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources.
180 over 111, and I had a stroke. I couldn't speak or walk.
This is high blood pressure. Get back on your plan. Go to loweryourhbp.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association, American Medical Association, and the Ad Council.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Welcome back here to Talk El Paso, airing on this News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. Get into more of the comments over there as we do, popping those up on screen. But in the meantime, we are joined now here in studio by Estefania Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely happy to talk further with you about some of the many important and in-depth stories that you in particular have been reporting on. So, one of the ones that we were talking about last week and that you, of course, had on KFOX 14 at News at 9, when we talked last week, that evening, was about Narcan and the situation and the availability here in the Borderland as kind of a part of an ongoing series we've been doing on with drugs and very much related to the fentanyl issue that we've been seeing increasing focus, both again in your reporting and from both local, state, and even federal officials all in the region.
Yeah, so I had noticed in some cities, even in Texas and Austin, there are vending machines, if you will, with free Narcan. In New Mexico, in Las Cruces, it's available for free through the Department of Health. And so I wanted to know here in the Borderland if, the DEA is saying that they are seeing an increase in drug overdoses. What are the measures that people can take if they themselves feel like they're experiencing an overdose? And it doesn't necessarily have to be from illicit drugs. It could be from prescription drugs as well.
Right.
Maybe taking one pill too many. Just what can be done to reverse the effects of an overdose until you can get some sort of a medical response. And so, like I mentioned, I found out that through the Department of Health in New Mexico, they do have a grant which provides free trainings on how to use Narcan. And Narcan is the brand name for naloxone. So naloxone is, I guess, the drug, if you will, but Narcan is what it's mostly known as.
Right.
So there's free trainings for that. There's also free Narcan for people in Las Cruces. In Texas, particularly, for example, in El Paso, you can buy it through a pharmacy. Some insurance companies do allow you to get that, for free. It really just varies. It's not as widespread in Texas right now as it is in New Mexico. And that partly could be because this has been a problem that has been going on in New Mexico a little longer than it has been in Texas. So the prevention efforts are a little more, I guess, grounded than they are here in Texas, where they're barely starting to, pick up on this. And so I will note that naloxone or Narcan is not a prevention medicine.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's something that you take to counteract the reaction of an overdose. Prevention, obviously, is, you know, what the DEA puts out with their like one pill can kill campaign,
Right.
trying to let people know that, you know, you may think that you're taking prescription drugs. If, for instance, you're buying them online, you think you're buying prescription drugs, but if you're getting them from somewhere else that's not a pharmacy, there's no guarantee that there's no fentanyl in it. Same with illicit drugs, even if it's,
Yeah.
you know, cocaine, heroin, whatever it may be, you don't know if it has fentanyl in it. And so that was the basis of this story, is where people can get Narcan, where they can get training for it. It's kind of like a nasal spray. And in speaking with the Department of Health and even with prevention coalitions in New Mexico, they say that this is something that they think everyone should have in their home. Just, you never know, especially if, for instance, you know, you send your kids to their grandparents' house and they take medication. You don't know if by accident, you know, the kids might pick up a pill that could have been dropped. You just never know. And so just knowing what your plan is before you're even in that situation. If you have prescription drugs at home, if you you know, can prepare for those types of circumstances, they kind of say it's the equivalent almost of like an EpiPen, which is often used with allergic reactions. And so it's very readily available if you all are looking to have Narcan in your homes, in your car, on you, whatever it may be. Usually a dose lasts about 30 to 90 minutes, which is enough for first responders to get to you. And Texas and New Mexico do have the Good Samaritan law. So
Right.
if you do help someone who you believe is having an overdose and you're doing it out of, you know, goodwill, you are protected through that law.
Also, another important note to be made about Narcan specifically is that it literally only affects overdoses. So if someone is unconscious, if someone, I mean, there is some very important and basic training people should get to use this, but I hesitate to say this, but the best phrase I can come up with is foolproof, because if someone is not having an overdose, it in general will not cause any further reactions to them. So it's not going to cause any harm, even if administered, you know, in a situation that doesn't require it.
Right, and it does expire. However, if
That's
it's
important,
if
yeah.
it's kept in you know, the way it's packaged, and it hasn't been used, and you're still, if that's all you've got, use it, because chances are that it will still work. I think the expiration on it is 3 years, which the Department of Health will replace it for you if you have expired Narcan, or they'll refill it if you've used it. So that's just something to keep in mind, that even if you have it and if it's expired, definitely still use it if you're in a situation where you or someone you know might be having an overdose.
Again, if you're just joining us, guest right now is Estefania Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Want to find out anything more about her reporting these stories and the ones we got coming up for you, of course, find them over at kfoxtv.com and just click under the KFOX 14 Investigates tab. And of course, we had another one out this week so far that has both kind of relations to this, but also further to one of the larger stories we've been talking about the many things involving the district attorney's office, the many cases, filings, and controversies lately. So you dug deeper into one of the specific points, and the reason I'm kind of connecting these two stories here is because it does deal with drug and crime labs involved in parts of this that has been, well, a point had been made in some of the filings by the district attorney's office related to the backlog that has been being discussed here. So what did you look at and what did you find out?
So this report is a continuation of all the stories we've done with the DA and some of the cases that have been dismissed. When we had interviewed her a few weeks ago, she had said that drug cases, sometimes they don't have the lab reports for them, and so they can't file a case. They say the district attorney had mentioned that because of the pandemic, because crime labs are backed up, that's the reason why they themselves were experiencing a backlog with the cases. And so since she had mentioned that there was a backlog with the crime labs that the DA's office uses, I went ahead and I contacted them. The DA's office uses two entities, if you will, for that they send these the evidence to. They have they send one to the El Paso Police Department has a contract with a small lab, NMS Labs, which has a small lab in EPPD headquarters here. They only deal with narcotics. And then there's also the Texas Department of Public Safety. They use, depending on the type of evidence, they either send it to the lab in Austin or the lab that they have here in El Paso. I reached out to both entities. El Paso police said that they have not experienced a delay or a backlog. And if there is, that's something that they usually try and address fairly quickly. Texas DPS said that for for the most part, they also are not experiencing a backlog. They do have their lab manager meet with the DA's office every month to see if there's any cases in particular that need to be expedited. But for the most part, they're not seeing a backlog or a delay in the cases that are sent to the lab. I'm trying to find here. They sent me a really long statement explaining how sometimes it's even depending on like legislation or population growth that could impact how quickly results are provided through the lab. They give the example of how West Texas, parts of West Texas sometimes have a backlog because of the Texas Hemp Act of 2019.
Right.
So that obviously changes the way that they have to test things. So that was one of the examples that they provided us to, when we do have a backlog, it's because of, situations like that, legislation, like the Hemp Act, for example. So then I went back to the DA's office and I asked, you all had mentioned that there was a delay or a backlog at the crime labs. The crime labs say that they're not seeing that. So where's the disconnect? I'm trying to understand exactly what is going on. I spoke with the assistant district attorney, and he said that they had problems with the pandemic slowing things down. His quote directly, bottom line is prosecutions and just the law itself are not something that is a rapid response to what takes place. When you introduce a pandemic in the middle of that situation, everything has to slow down. He basically explained how it gets complex when they send evidence to the lab, especially if, for instance, they send evidence to be tested for one thing and then it comes back and they're like, okay, well, actually, we need it to be tested for other narcotics or other substances to try and build their case. And so that might mean that they are continuously kind of doing a back and forth with the lab, which may delay them preparing the case or whatnot. So that was the response that I got from the DA, and it's pretty complex the way this works as far as the types of substances that get sent and which labs they go specifically to. I have that detailed in the web story if you all are interested. As well as the entire statement from DPS and also the statement that I got from El Paso Police.
I mean, I think people, even in this day and age, still have maybe that kind of like a CSI, a rapid testing. It can be done within the span of a montage, all of this testing, and that's super not how this works.
It takes a while, yeah.
So important details there, but of course we'll be keeping on top of this situation as the situations involving the district attorney's office continue to evolve and some of these case filings and things keep moving along. And on a, not related to this one, but related to some of your previous reporting as well, particularly involving the city and the city manager and some of the incentives and economic growth. That's your big story coming up tonight, right?
Yeah, so tonight, and I continue to get this question, I want to say a few months ago, probably was earlier this year, actually. We had put out a couple stories that the city had announced that it would be providing incentives for investors that were looking to renovate the Crest building and the Texas Tower. And those are both downtown. And, the comments we got from a lot of people were that, this is a time when property values are going up. Why is it that the taxpayers get the burden and how come investors, get all of these rebates?
Right.
And that's something that I continuously get, comments on or emails about. And so you'll remember I recently interviewed the city manager, Tommy Gonzalez, a few weeks ago.
Right.
And even within that story, so many people replied to me or commented saying, but did you ask him about the incentives? Like, why are we providing so many incentives? And so I did ask him about that. And so that's what the story tonight focuses on. And he explains why in the long run, providing these incentives is something that is supposed to provide or lessen the burden on taxpayers so that they're not paying as much, basically because they're using state funds to incentivize people or investors to invest in the city. and help the city grow. And so it's really complex. And I think that's just a little taste of what it might be. But basically, in a nutshell, you all have asked, why do we keep offering incentives if it's affecting taxpayers? The answer will be tonight.
Excellent. So again, check out that story coming up tonight, KFOX 14 News at 9. And of course, the web story posted along about that point on kfoxtv.com. And again, look under the KFOX 14 Investigates tab here. Again, guest right now here in studio is Estefania Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. We're talking more with her about some of the other big stories going on in our region after this break. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break. You're on News Radio 690 KTSM.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hey everyone, this is Robert Olguin with your KFOX 14 News Update. The legal battle between the Isleta del Sur Pueblo and the state of Texas over bingo-style gambling at Speaking Rock Entertainment Center is officially over after the case was dismissed today. According to the DWA's attorney, the state of Texas dismissed all their claims after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in June that the tribe was allowed to offer the gambling service at Speaking Rock. The DWA say they can continue now to operate bingo-style games. The city of El Paso voted to spend an additional $4 million to bus migrants to New York. The vote was 6-2 yesterday in the meeting, which included a presentation about what's being done to provide the charter buses to New York. City Council said that the term of the contract was 16 months for a total not to extend over $6 million. Mayor Oscar Leeser assured City Council that the city would eventually get reimbursed by the federal government. This has been your KFOX 14 News Update. I'm Robert Olguin.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
Monsoon season officially comes to an end this Friday, and in the meantime, we'll continue to see drier and sunny weather along with seasonably warm temperatures. Your forecast for tonight keeps mostly clear skies in place, with temperatures cooling into the middle to upper 50s by early tomorrow morning. Coming up tonight, we'll talk about how long this quiet weather pattern will last, plus a look at your weekend forecast. From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Kira Miner.
This report is sponsored by Staples Stores. Recycle your old technology free during Staples Free Tech Take Back. Items like old modems, mice, and mobile phones, or cables, calculators, and camcorders. Staples Rewards members get $5 back in rewards. Exclusions apply. Limit 1 reward per month. Visit staples.com/recycling. Recycle at Staples.
There's a clear and present danger. It's deadly fentanyl, and it's killing our kids. How's it getting here? Through our southern border.
That's Tarrant County Sheriff Bill Wayburn warning us that the drug cartels are using the open border to flood Texas with fentanyl. The cartels even make fentanyl in the form of candy that's targeted to our kids. They call it rainbow fentanyl. This year alone, law enforcement has seized enough fentanyl to kill every Texan 10 times over. They call it a weapon of mass destruction. But Beto O'Rourke must not care about that because he supports open borders. Despite the deadly drugs, the gangs, the human suffering, Beto says there isn't a problem at our border. Not a problem. Our border is considered the most dangerous in the world, and it's getting worse. Beto O'Rourke, he's too radical and too dangerous for Texas. And it's why Beto O'Rourke should never be governor of Texas.
Political ad paid for by Texans for Greg Abbott.
Talk El Paso, bringing you the biggest stories from the Borderland and beyond, 4 to 6 p.m. every weekday. Brought to you in part by Sergio Lewis Body Shop. Call the pros at 915-593-0191. That's Talk El Paso, Monday through Friday at 4, right here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
It's baffling to think that 1/3 of America was for the revolution, 1/3 against, and 1/3 just didn't want to pick a side. Families were torn apart, like Ben Franklin's. Be sure to catch this week's edition of Our American Stories on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This report is sponsored by the Our American Stories podcast.
Because you never hear this.
Hey, hon, I'm late. Chris, I am so pleased you missed the beginning of our meeting.
Thanks for making me wait, Dad. I talked to a lot of strangers.
Check on your commute. Stay informed. Traffic and weather all day. Or you might never hear the end of it.
Well, you were late to our anniversary dinner that one time.
Yes, how could I forget?
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM. News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Welcome back here to Talk El Paso, airing on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on our various social media pages, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, either under Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk, depending on, well, whatever works best for you on whichever of those platforms you use the most. Up on there, and for the most part on all of them, in multiple names. So let us know. Keep those comments coming. We'll be popping up those on screen. But again, we are talking here with Stephanie Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Thanks for sticking around with us.
Yes, of course.
So, of course, talking about some of the big stories going on in our area. We've already delved into a few, including earlier in the program here, including what's going on with migration and the border security, all that stuff. And also, of course, some of the election things we're dealing with. But one that's been... We've been talking about maybe a lot of back-burnered stories. Things have been kind of going on this whole time, but haven't necessarily got as much focus on. It was an interesting one about the city trying to address what exactly is going on with the overgrown medians. That, I mean, half of my drive, I feel like, to the station coming in every day, I'm still noticing. I've been noticing crews going out, but it seems like there's been more growth than there have been crews.
Yeah, so the city's environmental services department says that they take care of about 300 medians across the city, and they have 28 workers to do that, to basically take care of the weeds, the overgrowing weeds. The weeds that we're seeing right now, the city says it's a result of the monsoon season that we've had.
Right.
We've had a lot of rain, and so that's caused the weeds to really grow. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed that they're also having a cleanup this weekend. This is something that I think a lot of people have brought to the city's attention. And so the city is having a cleanup where volunteers can help clean this up. It's going to be this Saturday. They're closing off the streets where people can volunteer to clean up the weeds. They're going to be providing food and drinks as well. And I think that's one of the ways that the city is trying to get ahead of the problem, just because they don't really have a lot of employees to be able to tackle the weeds at all 300 medians. And so that was definitely one of the stories that came as a result of people saying, what is going on with the weeds and when are they going to be pulled? Like, what is happening here? The city is aware of it. And so they're going. I think the process, it's not just go and tackle one median and then we're done. I think it's a 1 or 2 week process that it takes for them to handle each median. And so I think that's why it's taken so long, and they have their own system as to what gets prioritized.
Yeah, I think the definitely impairing of any driving, viewing is part of it, but also, I mean, there's the spraying that they do that like green, blue foam that ends up painting the area. So, I mean, yeah, it is a process. And again, if people are interested in that event that you mentioned there, it's Saturday, October 1st, coming up at the Montwood near Saul Kleinfeld, and volunteers can park near the EP Fitness there. So interesting way that they are working on this. And yeah, I guess anything being done will be better than nothing, even though I'm sure we'll get some interesting comments on that point here. And another one, particularly on then public safety, that I think people are interested in, or maybe a little bit concerned about, even on a slightly kind of more broad note, is about what's going to be going on with fire stations in El Paso. Some new ones have had ground broken on them, including in northwest El Paso and in parts of the east side, including the Far East Regional Command Center. But then there are going to be 3 specific fire stations that are going to be undergoing renovations, and in some cases shuttered during that time frame.
Right. So this is part of the voter-approved 2019 public safety bond. As you mentioned, there are 3 fire stations that might have, they're going to be reassigned temporarily while they're making these renovations to these particular fire stations. One of them is on McRae. That's Fire Station 19. And so the units, the fire and ambulance units, are temporarily going to be reassigned to the nearby Fire Station 25 and 24, which are the closest ones to that area. There's Fire Station 20, which is on Edgemere. Operations will not be affected during the renovations, and so they don't anticipate having to move any of the units for that particular fire station. And then for Fire Station 21, which is on Dyer, they will have to reassign some ambulance and fire units temporarily to the nearby fire station 23.
So that's going to be affecting some of those operations, but again, mostly just from the particular fire stations. Otherwise, the units that were stationed in them will be moved around. So this may affect some of the response times, and that they're coming from different locations. So if you were living right next to it before, but again, some of these things going on in the order of about an order of months in order to get all of this work done. Some of them being expected as soon as 2023 for most of them. So updates on that coming. But again, a lot of growing pains going on, even as we've been having some further conversations about what's going on with roadways and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a whole breakdown if you all are interested on how much it's going to cost each fire, just the renovations for each fire station. I know people are always interested in how much, when it comes to money, how much is this going to cost? And so there is a breakdown of that as well.
And what exactly is going into it here. But again, if you're just joining us here in studio, guest right now is Estefania Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Again, want to find out any information about what they got going on in these stories. Again, kfoxtv.com. One that has been, it's an unfortunately kind of recurring story, I feel like, and it's taken on a new format in this way of deputies warning El Pasoans of scammers pretending to be from the sheriff's office. And this almost feels like perennial, growing up like weeds in its own right, as it comes up every so often that someone is finding a new novel way to try and scam people out of their money. And in this case, again, pretending to be from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, which is why this warning is going around to watch out for this and take, specific actions not to take as well.
Yeah, we've seen this, with the police department, with the utility companies, whether it's, El Paso Water, El Paso Electric, where they put out these notices of be on the lookout for these scams. They are not part of our departments. They're not coming from us. And it's people who are calling saying, we're from the sheriff's office. We are calling because you missed your jury duty or you have a warrant or whatever it may be. And then they're asking for money to solve the issue. And so the sheriff's office says that they would never call anyone asking for payment over the phone or to basically tell them, hey, you didn't show up for jury duty. For the most part, all of that communication is always done through mail, sometimes even email. And so like I've said, we've seen this with other entities as well. And so they're just putting out that notice again of just, don't fall for these phone scams.
Yeah, because they're never going to call you unsolicited to demand money or that you're going to be arrested. Frankly, if there's a warrant for your arrest, they're just going to arrest you, among other things. That's why they have those warrant amnesty days when those are out there. But again, it's gotten to the point where I keep noticing it more and more at, say, any of our local retailers, Walmarts, etc., that they've got the signs at checkout, be aware, do not provide anyone information on gift cards, say, over the phone or any other ways, because that may be how they request the payment to be made here. You need to go and get a cash card and read us the number off of it, and then it'll be considered paid. None of that will ever actually happen officially, is the important point. And people need to remember here that, again, this actions not to take is to follow through with these scammers, say, hey, send me it in writing. You've got my address if you think you know where I live, or just actually hang up on them would be the better way to do it. And if you got any questions about it, hang up and then dial the number from these organizations. Like if you've got contacts with the sheriff's department or need to get a hold of them directly, look up the number, call them directly, and don't, again, give out any information. And again, the El Paso Police Department's non-emergency number, 915-832-4400. Again, 915-832-4400. Or, again, the El Paso County Sheriff's Department's non-emergency number, 915-832-4480. 915-832-4480. Call those numbers if you have any questions, if you're actually being contacted by a deputy or not, and they should be able to help you.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm trying to see here. I've pulled, just searching this up, so many web stories have come up.
Yeah.
Of all the times that we've let you all know they will not call you. And just as you mentioned, Andrew, for sure, just call them back if you are feeling uneasy about whether it is the sheriff's department, whether it is the police, the water company, or whatever it may be.
Again, it's kind of just generally good advice. If you have any reason to doubt, be concerned with, wondering if it's real or not, hang up, don't respond, contact yourself genuinely. I've had a couple of occasions on my own where someone's calling me up and saying, hey, give me this information, and I've just hung up, and then I'll call back, and sometimes it's been legitimate, in which case I've said, hey, by the way, you might want to change your call procedures because this is sounding kind of scammy in this day and age, even if it is legitimate. So I've dealt with it. So sometimes it can be legitimate, but it never hurts. They were a little annoyed at me, but I was like, hey, that's mostly your problem, guys. You called in a very sus kind of way in this day and age. So it never hurts to just hang up, don't respond, do it on your own, whether it comes in through, phone calls, text, emails, any of it.
Yes, for sure. Always be vigilant, even if it's a phone call, and even if they have a little bit of information on you, just always be a little suspicious of that.
Also, specifically, even if it looks like it's on your caller ID on your screen, say if it looks like it says so whatever agency they're claiming to be from, don't take that as gospel either, because phone spoofing, where it makes it look like, but it actually isn't from that. I mean, I've seen pictures where people look like Barack Obama or Donald Trump is calling you, because that's the way they've spoofed it on the phone. So just don't trust it if you have any reason. Trust your gut on this. If you got any reasons to think, yeah, this seems fishy, believe yourself first and foremost here. So that's some of the stories going on besides the big ones we're already talking about in the community here. And again, if people want to get a hold of you, they can of course do so to add their own tips for, again, these investigative stories you got going on, right?
Yes, of course. So you all can email me at eyseyffert@kfoxtv.com.
And again, we'll post that up, and of course our social media over on our Facebook page and the social media channel. So look for that. So again, guest right now has been Estefania Cypher, an investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX14. Again, the story coming up tonight, KFOX14 News at so listed over on kfoxtv.com. Just click under the KFOX14 Investigates tab. So Estefania, thank you very much for checking in with us about the big investigative stories and other things going on in the community, as we do most Wednesdays.
Yes, of course. Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely here. So that'll take us through that next break right now. So coming out of this break, opening up those phone lines as we do at this point during the program. That number to call is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
On the 54 Patriot northbound at Kenworthy, that earlier crash is all cleared up. The exit is back open, and the backup has disappeared. I-10 eastbound at Red, an accident reported. Gateway Boulevard eastbound at North Piedras Street, a vehicle stopped in the right lane, stay to the left. Gateway West at Geronimo, an injury accident with El Paso Fire on the scene, and a crash Zaragoza at Sierra Este. Terry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Staples Stores. Recycle your old technology free during Staples Free Tech Take Back. Items like old modems, mice, and mobile phones or cables, calculators, and camcorders. Staples Rewards members get $5 back in rewards. Exclusions apply. Limit 1 reward per month. Visit staples.com/recycling. Recycle at Staples.
Hey, Sean Hannity here from my dear friends at Lone Star Transfer. I love these folks. With all of us traveling so differently these days, timeshares, they're kind of becoming a thing of the past. Now, if you're stuck in one, you don't have to be. Our friends at Lone Star Transfer, they can help you. Now, with skyrocketing assessments and maintenance fees, still owning a timeshare is very risky, and for over a decade, Lone Star Transfer, they have successfully helped thousands and thousands of owners legally, permanently get out of their burdensome timeshare. They have an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. Now, Lone Star Transfer is a family-owned company. They have earned their reputation for delivering first-class customer service. They're going to guarantee the release of all liability to your timeshare in writing and in a specific time frame. Call today for a free, no-obligation consultation, 833-594-0075. That's 833-594-0075, or online at lonestartransfer.com.
January 6, 2021. President Trump addresses his supporters.
We will never give up.
Chaos breaks out. The United States Capitol is breached.
We need more ammunition.
Democrats hold hearings. A nation is divided. Facts distorted by political spin.
At least one person over here is being...
What really happened? The Epoch Times pulls back the curtain to uncover the real story of January 6. This acclaimed documentary analyzes the police response, the killing of Ashley Babbitt, and facts obscured by the legacy media. See it now on epochtv.com and share with as many friends as possible. The real story of January 6th is free online through September at epochtv.com. That's EPOCHTV.com.
Listen to Red Pilled America's multi-part series on Richard Nixon. It's an in-depth look into why the media in Hollywood are so obsessed with him and goes a long way in explaining what Watergate was really about. Listen to Red Pilled America on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Red Pilled America.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. Thank you for tuning in however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on our social media pages, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Short timing at this segment, so we're just going to go ahead and skip to the top of the next hour here as to keep the bean counters happy and all that kind of stuff. Want to keep the lights on around here, but if you want to get on the line, we use that phone number and line open available now, 915-544-5876, 544 KTSM. Got a lot of comments that have come in. Again, thanks to our guest from this hour, Stephanie Seifert, with our investigative reporter with our news partners at KFOX 14. Talk more about those stories. Of course, y'all's comments and a whole lot more coming out at the top of this hour, and the news break coming. So stay tuned. More of everything we do at this point during the show after this quick break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
On the 54 Patriot northbound at Kenworthy, that earlier crash is all cleared up. The exit is back open, and the backup has disappeared. I-10 eastbound at Red, an accident reported. Gateway Boulevard eastbound at North Piedras Street, a vehicle stopped in the right lane, stay to the left. Gateway west at Geronimo, an injury accident with El Paso Fire on the scene, and a crash Zaragoza at Sierra Este. Harry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
From fuel injectors to intake valves to combustion chambers and beyond, your car's emission system takes a beating. It gets choked with baked-on carbon that affects your air-to-fuel ratio, slowing you down. You gotta keep it clean to get top performance, longer vehicle life, higher gas mileage, and to pass state emissions testing. Show your car some love with CRC Guaranteed to Pass Emission System Cleaner. Yep, guaranteed to pass. Strong language for a strong product. And here's some more. Double your money back if you don't pass. You know it's gotta work. It's on the shelf at your favorite auto parts store, so grab some today. Expensive? Heck no. Hard to use? Heck no. Effective? You bet. Try it once, and you'll add it to your car a few times a year to keep things rolling just right. CRC Guaranteed to Pass Emission System Cleaner. Look for the box.
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an extreme flash flood.
Disasters don't plan ahead, but you can. Talk to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Weather and traffic info. You need it? We have it. Traffic and weather all day. Stay informed. News Radio 690. News KTSM on the hour and the hat. Traffic and weather all day. News Radio 690 is KTSM AM El Paso, an iHeart radio station.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. Millions of Floridians are hunkering down as Hurricane Ian slowly passes over the Sunshine State. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the storm surge has peaked.
It may end up being a Category 5, but at a minimum, it's going to be a very strong Category 4 that's going to rank as one of the top 5 hurricanes to ever hit the Florida Peninsula.
He said reports are coming in about some structural damage across the state, but that flooding and the surge, which has hit around 12 feet, remain the big issues. He also announced today that over 1 million people are without power. President Biden is set to visit FEMA headquarters in D.C. tomorrow for a briefing on Hurricane Ian. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters the federal government is fully engaged in helping Florida deal with the massive storm. Several states are bracing for impact from Ian as it's expected to spread into the southeast and mid-Atlantic regions. Eastern Georgia and coastal South Carolina could get up to 8 inches of rain by the weekend. Russia is rejecting suggestions it was behind explosions on 2 pipelines which are leaking gas in the Baltic Sea. Trent Murray says the EU believes the leaks are the result of foul play.
For safety reasons, specialist divers looking to investigate what happened are currently unable to get close to the leaks on both Nord Stream 1 and 2. Aerial footage released by the Danish Air Force shows a big circle of bubbles measuring close to 1 kilometre in radius, currently sitting above one of the leaks on the Baltic Sea, saying, quote, "These incidents are not a coincidence. All available information indicates that the leaks are a result of a deliberate act."
The head of schools in Uvalde, Texas, says he will not meet with a group of parents who are protesting outside of the district's headquarters. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio. President Biden is shining a spotlight on food insecurity and hunger. Speaking in D.C., Biden cited a goal of ending hunger in the U.S. by the end of the decade. He said fighting hunger should be a bipartisan effort involving a whole-of-government approach. Biden insisted kids should never go hungry and called on Congress to approve a permanent child tax credit. Schools throughout Virginia are looking to investigate new hires more thoroughly. Kathy White explains.
More background checks are being recommended at Virginia schools. That was revealed in a new report after a convicted sex offender was hired in Fairfax County. He worked as a counselor at Glasgow Middle School before being fired this summer. Superintendent Michelle Reed spoke to parents last night, promising tighter rules moving forward. She promised more will be done to screen those applying for jobs in the school system.
A death squad is targeting spotted lanternflies in parts of New York City. Sarah Lee Kessler has the story.
It calls itself the SLF Slaughter Squad and is armed and dangerous to invasive spotted lanternflies that dine on plants and trees in Hell's Kitchen. 6 squad members are hitting streets in the 40s between 11th and 12th Avenues 3 times a week with a deadly concoction of Dawn dish soap, vegetable oil, and water. They're spraying the winged pests to death or stomping on them, and now they're encouraging folks in other city neighborhoods to do the same. Sarah Lee Kessler, New York.
Ohio Stadium on the campus of Ohio State University is a historic landmark. A historical marker was installed in front of the horseshoe this morning. Ohio Stadium hosted its first game on October 7th, 1922, and turns 100 years old this year. OSU will mark its centennial celebration at the shoe with Saturday's homecoming game against Rutgers. Brian Shook, NBC News Radio.
The biggest stars in all of music share the stage at our iHeartRadio Music Festival.
A stallion.
Your girl Megan Thee Stallion.
A pit bull.
Mr. 305.
A couple of combs.
Luke Combs. Sean Diddy Combs.
A couple of legends.
Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo.
The Black Keys.
Black Eyed Peas.
LL.
Cool J.
Maren Morris. And
Love this month.
She.
Avril Lavigne.
He.
Lionel Richie.
And them.
Sam Smith.
Halsey.
Our iHeartRadio Music Festival, brought to you by Capital One.
Coming to the CW October 7th and 8th.
This report is sponsored by the Mark Moss Show podcast.
Bitcoin's US dollar valuation might be down, but the technology, progress, and adoption is moving forward at a blistering rate. I'm Mark Moss, helping you navigate the decentralized revolution. Listen to the Mark Moss Show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The El Paso Community Foundation supports the causes you feel passionate about here in the Borderland, whether it's education, social services, arts and culture, the environment, health, or economic development. The El Paso Community Foundation has been promoting philanthropy and progress in our hometown region for more than 45 years. Make your mark with us. Start a fund today for good, for El Paso, forever. Learn more at epcf.org. That's epcf.org.
Downtown El Paso's Restaurant Week is September 23rd through the 30th. Visit downtownelpaso.com for more.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thanks for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days. Facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or Twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. A lot of comments coming in there, including some robust discussion, shall we say, about economics, basic or not here. Also, of course, want to mention some of our sponsors of the show. Talk El Paso, brought to you in part by Sunland Park, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat. Of course, you can find them at 950 Crockett to find some of the best brands and availability in our region. So again, Sunland Park, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat. Appreciate them and sponsoring our show as we continue our mission to have live local talk radio here in the Borderland. So delving into some of those comments, again, we allow comments and all the things going on with it. Just know, if you're getting a little bit into essay territory, we might not be able to put up on screen just because there is a character limit for what actually just fits on screen. I wanted to mention at least part of some of the discussion going on specifically about fentanyl and the parts of it, because as we were talking again with previous hour, Stephanie Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14, Juan Carlos Escobar Lazo taking issue with that and the idea of it being available in the area, saying that's ridiculous. Giving it like that is enabling people to consume more drugs, like in other cities have places where drug addicts go to shoot. I think you're talking about like safe usage sites in other places, or even like needle exchange programs come to mind. I think you tried to force the metaphor a little bit further, saying like it's giving a box of preservatives. I think you may have meant prophylactics in that case, or pimp gloves, another way to put it. It's like giving a box of prophylactics to a rapist. Don't rape anyone, but if you do, here's a box of preservatives. And that's honestly where the analogy breaks down, because as we also said during that, Narcan is not a preventative. It does not stop you from being able to give an overdose. It basically means that if an overdose is happening, it can prevent you from dying from it, stopping the symptoms at that point. But it's not I'll take it and be ready for if I have an overdose, so I can just take all I want. No, that's not how it works. And frankly, sure, if it was something closer to like even a needle exchange, though, there are some very reasonable arguments in favor of that, of trying to mitigate harm that I know we've had some discussion on in the past. But let's put it this way. Given the fact that even 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be considered a lethal dose, and something like that can often, the protective equipment that is having to be issued to law enforcement, first responders, because of potentially fentanyl exposure coming along with that, I'm not exactly going to be opposed to having more Narcan available, as Juan commenting did point out. I want to make the point that Narcan is for opioid overdose only. That is a very important point to make, but the further point that it's not exactly harmful if used for any other circumstances, but won't have an effect. Like it's not something like I know a fire extinguisher is kind of a tempting analogy to use, except if you use a fire extinguisher, you don't need it, you're left with a mess. And if you use Narcan and you didn't need it, just doesn't do anything. So that's why I gotta say, sure, there are maybe some concerns about people maybe thinking it's safe to therefore use illicit drugs, but given the fact that we're talking about counterfeiting, I don't know if you've seen the billboards around town of the one pill can kill kind of things, or even the news releases being sent out by, say, the city of El Paso, a warning on the dangers of fentanyl, the concepts of, say, rainbow fentanyl, and all of the parts and involvement with it. It's a serious problem, and it's very much directly related to the opioid overdose crisis that we've been seeing in the United States. It's Kathy Codry saying every 9 minutes an American dies from overdosing on fentanyl. So I'm not like trying to call you out and saying you're abjectly wrong, but I got to disagree with that perspective on it, because it's a problem. It is absolutely a problem. And to say that, well, good luck, have fun, don't die, and you're on your own, is not exactly a good public health response. Now, if it has to be used for someone that was using illicit drugs, the fact of there needing to be more behind it and not just, well, you've been saved, have a good one, stop doing drugs. That's unsatisfactory. I'll agree with you there. But to say that therefore it shouldn't be available just because it could be used to someone who has done something that you find wrong, yeah, it's not a good. It's kind of like saying, well, we shouldn't have fire extinguishers. That'll encourage people to be playing with fire, as opposed to the fact that there can be accidents that happen to people that may end up needing it. So again, a lot more commentary going on there. But of course, we have that phone line open, and that number to call is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Let's get into those calls here now. We do have Frankie and Messia on the line with us here right now. Frankie, thanks for joining us.
All right. You cannot be serious. I heard just before you went off the air yesterday, some guy going, boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. The people are beating up on conservatives and Republicans saying that they hate children. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. The only time you care about children hey, Dad, whoever you are, tough break. Give it up. You don't know what the heck you're talking about. Now, another thing I want to say. I have not heard that Stephanie Seifert or this Eduardo guy on K-Fox or anybody out there getting on what's going on with Amber Parker. What is this? Just forget about it now? You just lost a teacher with 30 years experience, probably knows more about dangling participles and run-on sentences than anybody, and you El Pasoans don't care? What's the matter with you people? Do you realize how hard it is to find qualified teachers, and you just dump her? What's going on with this? That's the first thing I want to know.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I haven't heard more on that otherwise. I've had no contact, particularly with anyone representing Amber, as you're referring to it there. But I got to kind of wonder if, well, given her time and experience, if she has just decided to move away from this entirely. So I mean, I can have some expectations on if I was involved with it, why I might take a similar action, honestly, even if I felt fully justified in being opposed to the action being taken. I can also understand just being like, you know what? Yeah, you don't have to worry about the door hitting me on the way out because I'm gone. So whether or not that's the case or not, that's pure speculation on my part here. But no, that much has been said about what happened to Parker there. So if anything does come up, we'll certainly talk about it.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry that I'm sounding like a broken record, but I love education. I love teachers that are qualified, and God help us all, the non-existence of God of Abraham, that we need, the majority of people out there need instruction. And then you El Pasoans, and I don't know who all of you, but I mean, you just throw away a perfectly competent teacher for crying out loud. I just don't get your attitude. I just don't get it. And by the way, Befuddled Ben, let's go Amber Parker. That's all I want to say.
All right. Well, thanks for the point in the call. Do appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
All right. Have a good one there. I mean, yeah, that whole situation. I think point that we haven't really discussed here was something said by, because previously the EPISD Board of Trustees representative, essentially for the Coronado area, had expressed previously support for Parker, but then coming down and, of course, it was a unanimous decision to authorize the superintendent to proceed with the termination for Parker as part of that. And again, after previously saying support, again, our news partners over at KFOX 14, following up with him saying that Call changed his opinion. Daniel Call, sorry if I didn't say the name yet. Daniel Call changed his opinion after the investigation, which is why he said he voted in favor to start the process of firing Parker, saying, quote, any reasonable person that heard what the 7 trustees heard would have voted to terminate Amber Parker. I know that this says definitely led to a lot of speculation on that, which it's kind of idle at this point, because unless there's charges coming up, which I haven't seen anything on that either, but that would be the point at which start wondering, okay, what did they hear? Or was this enough pressure and enough reason for them to get rid of it? I mean, flip a coin, might be right on the balance. So at least one more comment I want to bring up here. Kathy Codry talking about the cleaning up of the medians in town, again, from our guest from last hour, saying that our tax dollars should pay for the cleanup. Yeah, that is something that you would think would be happening, but I guess focusing on a cleanup in any case would be a nice thing. And RJ saying, liking messing with scammers when they do call in, like to play with him, like India calls about my Windows and the computer, and I tell them I have Windows from Pella. a lot of fun with that one. You can feel the rising blood pressure. There are some videos out there that I've watched with a little bit of interest about people trying to not exactly scam back, and hack is not exactly the right term, but mess with call centers where they actually are, sending them sometimes like a booby trap, stink bomb packages, those kind of things. They're out there on YouTube if you find them. And I'm not saying that I am fully in support of, I mean, it's almost like mild vigilantism at the point, but I mean, it's a little bit of well, let's just call it just desserts and Schadenfreude. It does feel a little bit like. So let's go ahead and take that next break. Now, one more comment I want to get to. Ion Graham saying, Frankie, if you love education and teachers so much, tell me, what have you done to increase New Mexico's teacher salaries? It's pathetic. And Eric von Holstein-Rathlow saying, did EPIC listen to any eyewitness testimony or base their findings on the 18-second recording? Again, that's, I think, definitely part of the 18-second was part of it. Whether or not they listened to others is a little bit unclear, because they said that they had, again, what Call has said in follow-ups is that there are more things that the public may not know about what was included in the closed findings. So I'm not going to hold my breath on us actually knowing the answer to your question there, Eric. But let's go ahead and take that break now. Coming out of this break, we'll get to more of the calls, more of the comments, more of everything we do at this point during the show. So again, that number to get on the line, if you do choose to do so, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
An active Wednesday on your El Paso freeways. I-10 eastbound at Hawkins, a crash involving 3 vehicles there, blocking the right lane, causing a backup. On the 10 eastbound at Cotton, an earlier crash involving 3 vehicles, blocking the left lane, stay to the right. I-10 eastbound at Airway, an accident reported. El Paso Fire is responding. And Joe Battle northbound at Montana Avenue, another crash with police on the scene. Kerry Edwards, El Paso Traffic.
This report is sponsored by the Our American Stories podcast.
One of the most misunderstood times in American history is the Salem witch trials. While Arthur Miller's The Crucible has tainted our view, we'll bring you the honest look at what really happened. Be sure to catch this week's edition of Our American Stories on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
During this interruption, let's talk about disruption, emerging new channels, cookieless media. Marketers, are you missing out on one of the most engaged audiences in today's new open web? With Viant's programmatic software Adelphic, stay in tune with digital audio, stream the future on CTV, and level up with in-game, so you can see an average 3 times return on ad spend, maybe even on this very program next time. Viant, built for the new open web. Built for now. Visit viantnow.com to learn more.
A construction site is a noisy place where things can be misinterpreted. We need to redo the drywall. It can sound a lot like,
rewire the hole? The firing Paul?
Wait, what did I do? Or even,
Install a waterfall. Whose dumb idea was this?
be on the same page at every stage with Autodesk, from the designers to the field crew to the owner of the finished building. Autodesk Construction Cloud gives everyone clarity. Now, how about that drywall?
Here's a message just for the attorneys out there. So you passed the bar, joined a firm, or even built your own. Now are you finding out that you're doing more administration than actual law practice? Lexicon can help. Lexicon is a legal technology provider with over a decade of experience streamlining administrative tasks like timekeeping, billing, and more, so you can focus on maximizing billable hours and increasing client satisfaction. Call 855-4-LEXICON or visit lexiconservices.com/go to learn more.
Progressive Snapshot can save you money based on how you drive and how much you drive. So the safer you drive, the more money you could save. Now, if you didn't hear that because you were yelling at another car while driving, let me say it again. You need to calm down. Yelling is just making everyone as stressed out as you are and letting them all know that you definitely aren't trying to save with Progressive Snapshot. And if you did hear it the first time because you weren't yelling at another car, nice work. You'd love Snapshot from Progressive because it rewards safe drivers. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Snapshot not available in California and North Carolina or from all agents.
Freedom of speech lives here.
To me, freedom of speech is being able to say anything you want.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM. News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so. A lot of ways to interact with the show, particularly at this point during the program, when we do have those phone lines up and available. Well, full up at the moment, but if you want to squeeze in a little bit later, that number to call is 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. And a lot of comments coming in over on the social media as well, including on the comment from the last caller. Again, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch is where you can find us on those platforms, either under Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk, or maybe one or two others. If whatever works for you works best, then no worries. RJ, on the question about the Franklin teacher saying, was it sarcasm or not? That is the question. I can see myself saying the same thing about maps in a sarcastic way, referring to that phrase of the minor attracted persons. That is the particular issue at hand with that. And a lot of interesting points being made, including Eric von Holstein-Rathlow comment saying, compliment me on a job well done. Appreciate that. And how we can deal with it and deal with the work here. So they appreciate the feedback. Do take it and try to take it in equal measure of both what we're doing right and what we need to fix. So again, appreciate your comment on that. Other people commenting and chiming in again: RJ, Ion Graham, Kathy Codry, Flaco Jimenez, Eric McNabb, different Eric there, and more. Also dropping those likes and reacts. We do appreciate James Holmes, Matt Olson, Alex Campos, Robbie Flores, Monica Cervantes, Nicholas Lucanville, if I'm saying that right, Amber Banda, Flaco Jimenez, Ion Graham, and at least maybe one more that I'm not quite sure it shows up here. But again, appreciate it as much as possible. And if you're on the right platform, you can do so safely. So let's get back to those phone lines now. Again, that number to call is 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have Eric on the east side here with us right now. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Hello there. Yes, I wanted to comment on that Franklin story. The main local news site that covered that story was KFOX. And they're owned by the right-wing propaganda conglomerate Sinclair Broadcasting Group. Mm-hmm. And if you follow their local news page, they're consistently pushing far right-wing stories about the LGBT community, social justice, political correctness, and so on. So they spent a lot of time focusing on this Franklin story because it's a local culture war issue. And if you were to read how it was covered, you would see that KFOX was defending the teacher because we have an idea of what the actual context was. Like if you read the stories that KFOX did, her lawyer, the teacher, her husband, and the students, like none of them provided an acceptable context for what she had said, because there was no acceptable context. And the actual context that she was using was that she was pushing a far right-wing bigoted conspiracy theory about what political correctness and what woke culture is going to lead to. In far right-wing corners of the media world, you have Christian conservatives telling their followers that, respecting people's gender pronouns and respecting people's feelings is eventually going to lead to us protecting pedophiles and children being abused and stuff. It's the age-old tactic of associating LGBT people and efforts to protect them with pedophiles and grooming, which has been very popular. But the point I really wanted to emphasize was that we know the context of what that teacher said, and it was unacceptable. She was attacking her LGBT students and everyone else who's shielded by political correctness and concern for offending others. She was telling her students to not care about political correctness, to offend other people, because you know what? These people telling you not to do those things, they're eventually going to tell you to start protecting pedophiles. And that's just a very bigoted, disgusting right-wing narrative that's being promoted by right-wing media, and it's being parroted by these teachers. Just thinking that like it's an actual thing.
Okay, just make sure I'm clear on this here. It sounds like you're not liking the way it was covered, but it sounds like you're still in favor of the removal of the teacher that happened. Am I getting the sense of that here?
Absolutely, yes. She absolutely should have been fired. She wasn't saying that we should protect pedophiles. She wasn't saying that even though that's what it sounded like. But what she was actually doing was a fireable offense as well, because it attacks her students. And those who rely on political correctness to not be bullied at school or to fit in society and so on. You can't have public school teachers going on rants about political correctness and associating it with protecting pedophilia. That's common sense. The school district probably would have been sued if they didn't fire her. And again, there wasn't a single acceptable context that was provided by her lawyer, her husband, her, or her students. And the context that her students provided was the one that I just described, which is the common right-wing Christian conservative attack on the LGBT community.
Okay, well, interesting point there. I mean, I get some of your perspective there, I think, but I got to say, when you're talking about particularly our news partners over there at KFOX 14, that they did provide some of the background here. And so if you want to see this as an extension of culture war, that's entirely your prerogative, and I'm not going to exactly follow your reading of how the coverage was done anyway. They did include some interviews both with students in the classroom as well as community content as well. And essentially, yeah, the idea of it, sarcasm was a point of that you can't call pedophiles. You have to call them minor attracted persons. And if you're calling that as an attack on the LGBTQ community, plus, that's an interesting one to take here, because I know that there are technically, and heavy air quotes being used there for those that can't see the video, efforts underway to try and include that within the overall spectrum of the rainbow and flag and things we're talking about here. But I also know more than a few, at least someone saying here, RJ kind of calling out a similar ideas. Now, I will say that there may be a fine line to be drawn between people who have ingrained things in them and never act on them, but as soon as someone acts on it and decides to do something to a person that cannot consent, which in this case we're referring to children, as we in our society have decided are those under 18 as being unacceptable to be included in any adult's sexual activities. And what I firmly stand by, make absolutely no mistake about that, yes, that term for that phrase and that action would be pedophilia. Yeah, I know there's a few other things about like ebophilia, but that just sounds a lot more like trying to justify it and make that seem acceptable in its own right. So yes, that should and is rightly called the act of sexual, essentially predation on someone who is unable to consent because of the lack of their age is pedophilia. I have no reservations or compunction about calling that. What I will say is those that are seeking maybe treatment for it should maybe get a slightly different handling if they have never actually acted on it, but that's maybe a discussion for another time. But if you're saying that you're glad you got fired, it's an interesting take on it, but I'm not exactly following your logic when it comes to parts of the reasoning behind it here. So thank you for the point in the call. Do appreciate it. Let's try to get to at least one more before we hit that next call here. Again, the number to call is 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have Kevin on the east side here with us right now. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you. I found very interesting the story that Estefania Seifert was making concerning drugs in this city. She reported on the who, what, where, when. What I would like to see answered is the why.
Okay.
Why are these young people, mainly young people, attracted to drugs? Why they're taking drugs? When just today in the U.S. News and World Report, according to a report I got from KTSM, the United States ranks within the top 5 countries of the world, Switzerland being number 1. I don't know exactly where the U.S. is, but within the top 5. We live in a very good country, regardless of who's in charge or who's in the Congress or who's in the Supreme Court, regardless of all that. We are blessed by God to be living in this country. And for the life of me, I can't see why it is that young people especially would turn to drugs. And if I could give you just an example
Sure.
of what I'm talking about. When I was teaching in the school in the early 1990s in the Lower Valley, the administration brought in leg irons. Police brought them in. Five young men who had been in trouble with the law, and they were marched up to the stage, and it made quite an impression on these young kids. It was a middle school. And the purpose of their being in there, these criminals, was to explain as to why they had joined gangs. And they had all kinds of different reasons as to why they joined gangs, which is what got them in trouble. They had no father in the home. They came from otherwise broken homes. They fell into bad companionship with some evil people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would like to see a similar question being asked to young people as to why are you attracted to drugs? I'll tell you what, Andrew. There was a truck full of cocaine or heroin or marijuana or anything coming down this street and asking people, you want to have these? These are free. Hey, you can have this. You can have it. I wouldn't want them for anything in the world. If they were driving in the same way as if there was a truck being driven that had nothing but El Paso sand in it, I wouldn't want that either. I just don't understand. I would like to see these young people who have gotten into trouble, and I would like to see them interviewed, and I would like to see them explain why they fell in with drugs. I don't understand that, especially in this great country in which we live. And I don't know. That's my question for everybody.
I think trying to get to the root of it is definitely a right implication and right inclination you have, because, I mean, there's the often the punitive, like, well, just, get rid of them all, throw them all in jail, that'll solve the problem. And yet we still have this ravenous appetite in this country, like you were talking about, for the consumption of these. That is obviously not just, it's not like a handful of people or any one select group. It's across all realms and across all segments of our society. There's even some stratification within it about what is acceptable for certain classes or whatnot. And I mean, you can get really deep in the weeds with some of the breakdown of what exists here. But I think the longest and best way to solve the problem would absolutely be look at what are the causes for it. And there's a lot of theories out there. I am by no means an expert, but I've had a lot of similar questions that you have had about what could lead to this and what could lead to people doing this. I think a lot of similar things of what you already described there about how the upbringing happened, broken homes, lack of role models, etc., can lead to people falling in with things that otherwise competent and well-meaning people may have steered them away from. But even if you yourself saying if there were to be a crash in front of your house and a literal mound of cocaine in front of you, you would say, if you understood what it was, no. There's someone to be like, oh, well, I've never thought about it before. Maybe I'll try it. And part of the messaging that has come with that as well, I know that there's actually been a lot of criticism for the DARE program. So corollary to what we're talking about, bringing it in the schools here, that the DARE program back from the late last century was along the idea of like, okay, here's what, like, basically trying to do an education focus, but a lot of the outcomes, at least the analysis I've read on it, ended up becoming more from a spurning curiosity as opposed to answering questions and explaining the problems with it. In some cases, there were even like samples of the drugs brought in so that people could see it and students could see it and be like, okay, and this is what you need to stay away from, which it didn't quite work that way. It wasn't exactly present during my schooling, but there definitely was one specific video we watched that I think was an offshoot from that program that to this day is the only time I've ever been instructed on the complete and correct way to hold a meth pipe. And I'm still kind of baffled to this day that, wait, why did you show me that? That would have been nothing to do with how it works, but I think it was something about, looking for the telltale signs on the fingers, how you hold it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So there are right ways to go about this, or are difficult, but there are definitely very easy to tell the wrong ways. And I think we've done a lot of wrong ways in this country so far and trying to deal with it and quell it overall. And it's really going to be that side of it, the demand side. We focused a lot on the supply. I mean, the entire war on drugs could be seen as a focus on the supply side primarily, but focusing on the demand side in actual productive ways, as opposed to just, let's just try to quash it out here. I mean, there have been more than a few tongue-in-cheek headlines about congrats to drugs for winning the war on drugs. Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, I would like to see those people who have been caught, who are spending some time in jail or in prison, brought in and interviewed, maybe on TV or something, and explain why, what got them started on this, and why did they, even kids from young people from really good homes are doing this. As you said, it's across the spectrum of our society.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing this in this wonderful country? Don't you have everything you want? What is it about these drugs, especially with education, showing these people that these drugs are just ruining them physically, mentally, socially, and they need to be taught this not by experts and professors and people like me, but by their own peers who did get caught, who did spend time in jail.
Mm-hmm.
They can explain why this is happening, and I would like to see that. And I'll shut up now, and thank you very much.
Sure thing. Thanks for the point on the call. Do appreciate it.
Okay, Andrew. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Have a good one there. And tell you what, we got to take that next break now. Coming out of this break, we got callers on the line. We can squeeze more in if you want to. That number to call is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hey everyone, this is Robert Olguin with your KFOX 14 news update. The legal battle between the Isleta del Sur Pueblo and the state of Texas over bingo-style gambling at Speaking Rock Entertainment Center is officially over after the case was dismissed today. According to the U.S. attorney, the state of Texas dismissed all their claims after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in June that the tribe was allowed to offer the gambling service at Speaking Rock. The DUA say they can continue now to operate bingo-style games. The city of El Paso voted to spend an additional $4 million to bus migrants to New York. The vote was 6-2 yesterday in the meeting, which included a presentation about what's being done to provide the charter buses to New York. City Council said that the term of the contract was 16 months for a total not to extend over $6 million. Mayor Oscar Leeser assured City Council that the city would eventually get reimbursed by the federal government. This has been your KFOX 14 news update. I'm Robert Olguin.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
Heads up for 3 crashes on the I-10 eastbound right now. I-10 eastbound at Hawkins, 3 vehicles involved there, blocking the right lane. I-10 eastbound at Cotton, a multi-vehicle crash there, blocking the left lane. I-10 eastbound at Airway. Gateway east at Piedras, an injury accident. And police and fire on the scene of a crash eastbound Edgemere before the loop at Banner Crest Drive. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
Monsoon season officially comes to an end this Friday, and in the meantime, we'll continue to see drier and sunny weather, along with seasonably warm temperatures. Your forecast for tonight keeps mostly clear skies in place, with temperatures cooling into the middle to upper 50s by early tomorrow morning. Coming up tonight, we'll talk about how long this quiet weather pattern will last, plus a look at your weekend forecast. From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Kira Miner.
This report is sponsored by Red Pilled America.
Listen to Red Pilled America's multi-part series on Richard Nixon. It's an in-depth look into why the media in Hollywood are so obsessed with him, and goes a long way in explaining what Watergate was really about. Listen to Red Pilled America on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Red Pilled America.
Serenade of a made-up mind. There is no other like her. Bonnie Raitt, coming to you live with her band for the Just Like That Tour 2022. October 5th, Abraham Chavez Theater with special guest Mark Cohn. Bonnie Raitt live, on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Produced by AEG Presents.
The El Paso Community Foundation supports the causes you feel passionate about here in the Borderland, whether it's education, social services, arts and culture, the environment, health, or economic development, the El Paso Community Foundation has been promoting philanthropy and progress in our hometown region for more than 45 years. Make your mark with us. Start a fund today for good, for El Paso, forever. Learn more at epcf.org. That's epcf.org.
Staples Print and Marketing Services help small businesses create bold signs to make big impressions. Right now, get $10 off custom printed signs, banners, and posters when you spend $50 or more. Offer ends 10/1. Visit staples.com/this is your sign for details. This is your sign to print big at Staples. This report is sponsored by Staples Stores.
Children who grow up in poverty are part of a destructive cycle. At Child Fund International, we find this unacceptable. In 25 countries, we are vigorously fighting poverty and improving the lives of children and their families. Learn more at childfund.org.
The most current and comprehensive. Just minutes away at the top and bottom of the hour. And always online at KTSMradio.com. El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for joining us here, however you may be doing so. Being on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the very many different social media platforms. We're up on a lot of commentary coming in there, including Deborah Fry, Eric McNabb, Juans, RJ, Flaco Jimenez, Fred Marcus, Eric Van Holstein Rathwell, James Ratcliffe. Oh, more than I can list off here. Dropping those likes and reacts, we also do appreciate Fred Marcus, James Holmes, Matt Olson, Alex Campos, Robbie Flores, Monica Cervantes, Nicholas Lukenbull, Amber Banda. Let's see if I can get the full list here. Ida Beza Gardner, as well as Flaco Jimenez and Ion Grimm. I'm repeating some names. It sometimes shows up weird. Interesting call about the effect of it. There's a call off air. Wanted to pass along remembering of a program back from the 60s called SOS, Stamp Out Stupidity. And it was a kind of along the lines of what the previous caller was asking for, interviews and bringing in people who had been convicted for possession or use, more accurately, probably, of why they did, how they started, and that kind of information being given to students, but that, in her recollection, it was stopped because of parents concerned about the graphic nature of what was being discussed there. Interesting point to be made about that, but some other comments coming in about that. Deborah Fry saying it's so important to realize that drug addiction is hereditary and that it is a disease and is far more complicated than say no to drugs. Cannot make someone get sober. It has to come from the addict. I was raised in an addicted family, was the only one that it didn't hook. The other siblings were all addicted. Yeah, I mean, the components of it here, I think someone else said, Juans on a similar point. Why use drugs? Chemical imbalance in the brain, genetics, environment, socioeconomics. I mean, the fact that there are some aspects of predisposition to it certainly complicates the matter, as well as, I mean, really it needs to be addressed from all angles, both. And that's why I've kind of thought that probably the best way this could be handled, if not by any means the simplest, would be treating it as a mental health condition needing to be dealt with that way. RJ also on a similar note saying, I remember Scared Straight from Jersey prison, work for some of those kids. Former addicts make the best drug counselors. There is a similar kind of concept out there of like a peer support specialist that exists in modern circumstances, but I'm not quite qualified to comment on that, but essentially it's the part of it. Kathy Codry commenting saying, stop the mass amount of fentanyl coming across the southern border as a part of it. Absolutely. And Monica Cervantes saying, was about to mention the complication of addiction. Also, many children grow up with all the physical and mental material things needed, but a lack of emotional support or cold parents. It's sad. I mean, that's almost a generational thing at this point. The difference between it being you had everything you want in life. What more could you have wanted to when what they wanted was a parent? Apparently. So, I mean, it's a complicated subject. That's the simplest way I can think to put it right now. Let's go back to those phone lines now. We do have Raul in the Northeast on the line here with us right now. Raul, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew. Well, as you know, election time's here, and we're considering who to stand to Congress, so either Veronica Escobar or this lady, Armendariz, who doesn't have a chance in hell. I bet I don't even have to vote for Veronica, and she's still going to win without my vote. But in any case, I would like to know from her if Trump should pay the city of El Paso the $600,000 that he stiffed the city for his unpaid rally security costs. Because, to me, Andrew, I don't care how big of a producer somebody is, and that includes the president. They might be the most phenomenal salesperson or producer, like I said, but if I don't like their morals and their ethics and their street creds and their reputation in the street, I wouldn't hire them, especially if they're known to sexually assault women. And I would like to know from Mrs. Armendariz what responsibility does she think that Trump bears for the killings in El Paso by that racist, xenophobic Trump terrorist? Both our current and past congresspersons put part of the blame on Trump's racist, xenophobic rhetoric. And I'd also like to go back to those questions I asked yesterday. Is she a believer in Trump's big lie? And I'd like to know if how much responsibility she thinks Trump bears for the attack on the Capitol. And also what she thinks about him pilfering government documents and taking them with him to a maggot local. What's that about? Now, on watching the news and the coverage on the hurricane, wow, while there are many more beautiful and more happening places than in El Paso, at least we don't suffer from hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and earthquakes and wildfires. All we have is hot summers, mild winters, occasional dust storms, and dirty and poor air quality. Now, why would anybody want to live in a place that is regularly hit by hurricanes or floods that could kill you, flood your home, destroy your businesses, your schools, your shopping venues, and your infrastructure? I wouldn't want to live in such a place, no matter how beautiful, because it's a peninsula. And if I got my home destroyed by some anthropogenic climate disaster, I'd move to a place where those things haven't happened. So with about a third of humanity living relatively close to the ocean and the sea levels rising, it's time for those folks to move further inland and to higher ground if they can. The cities that they say are going to be underwater by 2030 include Amsterdam, New Orleans, Venice, Italy, Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, Kolkata, India, Bangkok, Thailand, and Basra, Iraq. But then these residents in Florida, a Republican state with a philosophy of personal responsibility and small government, will expect the government to rescue them and bail them out and then cut their taxes at the same time. Now, a lot of the Republicans believe Trump when he declared global warming a Chinese hoax. This is a state full of climate deniers, including Texas. Climate scientists and researchers indicate that anthropogenic global climate change is causing bad weather to be worse. And the climate scientists say that climate change is about to get a whole lot worse, as evidenced by these deadly extreme weather events that we've been experiencing. And according to a report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, these imminent weather catastrophes are likely to make the world sicker, hungrier, poorer, gloomier, and way more dangerous in the next 18 years as the Earth is struck regularly by deadly heat, fires, floods, drought, and in the future decades. And Exxon scientists told their bosses way back in the 70s that their product was harming the environment and warming the planet. And so then the energy plutocrats invested money in their purchased politicians and told them to hold the line and to question the science. And Trump calls it a Chinese hoax designed to cripple America.
I'll agree with you on one point in this, that yes, I am very glad that I live in El Paso. I live here for a variety of reasons, be it geographic, be it political, be it environmental, and I'll continue to be here for as long as I'm able to, knock on wood, because of all the other problems that we don't have. Yeah, anytime we've had when Katrina came through, Hurricane Katrina, and we had people calling us from family members of not local, obviously, saying, "Are you all okay? I heard about the hurricane hitting Texas," and us having to say, please look at a map for just a second. I just need you to, and then find where El Paso is and tell me if you're still worried about me. So, I mean, sure, I do think that there's an aspect of climate changes. This much has been shown over the geologic record. I know that the primary debate comes from the whole man-made aspect of it, but when you add more energy to a system, things tend to get a little bit more out of whack. That's why locally, what I'm saying that we need to prepare for is potentially those more extreme weather events, and why loose rock may not be the best decoration or landscaping thing for us for the foreseeable future, considering that that's what washes away very easily. So that's why, again, I kind of end up being less interested in the why and more of the what are we going to do about it and what can we do, particularly on the local level. So referring to how we continue development, particularly in the, developing arroyos in our area might not be that great of an idea really at any point. But furthermore, the fact that it might be getting even worse of an idea. Because yes, climate changes. You can literally, our landscape locally in this region is littered with the evidence of that, whether you're talking about, some of the Pueblo peoples and the reasons migrations happen there, specifically when you look at Mesa Verde and even further south into the South American continent. Evidence of all this surrounds us, that things that were previously habitable were no longer done so, and a lot of the evidence points to the fact that things change and it was no longer a viable way for people to inhabit. So if we're not prepared for that kind of level, we're going to definitely reap those rewards. And that's the conversation I'm mostly interested in having. And to your questions to the candidates here, we'll probably ask some of those, but primarily what we're going to do as we, again, get into our election coverage, what we'll be announcing more on tomorrow specifically, is going to be about the policies, because that's what we do here, is getting into why are they supporting what they're doing and why are they doing it here. So let's take at least one more call here. We do have Jerry on the northwest side of town here with us right now. Jerry, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to address a question that the individual had yesterday. I believe, if I have his name right, I'm not sure if I have his name right or not. Kevin?
Yes,
had to deal with the Second Amendment.
Oh, okay, maybe not that one then. Okay, but go ahead.
All righty. Well, when we have the Second Amendment, reason why we have the Second Amendment is not only for hunting, it's also for protecting ourselves. There's a lot of individuals out there that are not mentally stable, that do go out and do shootings, and without a weapon to protect yourself, you've heard that thing, taking a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah.
That old saying. You're going to lose if you don't have a weapon with you equal to or better than the individual that's coming at you. Now, with that said, it is the Second Amendment is a right, and it's a civil right. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay, what is a well-regulated militia? What is a militia at all? Okay, if people will look it up, it's under 10 U.S. Code 246, Militia Compensation and Classes. The militia of the United States consists of all able-bodied males at least 17 years of age, and except as provided by Section 313 of Title 32, under 45 years age, who are or who have made a declaration of intention to become citizens of the United States, and of female citizens of the United States who are members of the National Guard. Okay, and there's also one more thing. It has to deal with the Supreme Court. The United States versus Miller back in 1939. The primary holdings of this decision by the United States Supreme Court: only weapons that have a reasonable relationship to the effectiveness of a well-regulated militia under the Second Amendment are free from government regulation. Currently, the closest thing that we have available to us that compares to military weapons is the AR-15, because of laws that have been passed that are basically against what the Supreme Court's ruling was in 1939, considering automatic weapons. We have semi-automatic weapons. Now, the AR-15 is capable of holding the same magazine. It's a thing that holds bullets, for those that don't know, that is inserted into a magazine well on the weapon, the AR-15, and it shoots the same rounds as the military does.
Let me just, again, we're running out of time here, but let me cut to the chase here of what I'm assuming your point is that, yes, the point of having military weapons in civilian hands is literally the point of the Second Amendment. Now, there may be debates we can have on that, but ignoring that as the purpose there, and again, the whole well-regulated militia, what you described there is that, yes, who is the militia? The unregulated militia is us. It's the people. It's the of-age people of the United States. So there's a whole lot more to get into here. We'll get into more of that here. So appreciate the point in the call. Just got to take that last break so we can end the hour and not get in trouble here. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
10 eastbound is slow this afternoon, mainly because of a crash I-10 eastbound at Hawkins Boulevard exit involving 4 vehicles blocking the left lane, and there's a backup to the 54 Patriot with 11-minute delays, back-to-back bumper-to-bumper traffic. It's slow on the 10 eastbound from Trans Mountain down to the Patriot with 9-minute delays, and a minor accident reported on the Copia Street on-ramp to the I-10 westbound. It is on the right shoulder. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Red Pilled America.
Listen to Red Pilled America's multi-part series on Richard Nixon. It's an in-depth look into why the media in Hollywood are so obsessed with him and goes a long way in explaining what Watergate was really about. Listen to Red Pilled America on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Red Pilled America.
Hello?
Mike, this is Norma Jean at Sergio Lewis Body Shop near the airport. Have you seen Sergio?
I'm expecting him in a few minutes to cut a new commercial.
I'm really worried about him, Mike. He really believes he's a poet. It's gone to his head.
There's plenty of room up there. Anyways, his poetry isn't that bad.
Will you please have him call the shop?
Sure, Norma.
That's Norma Jean, Mike. Gotta go.
Yee, she's feisty. Hey, Sergio, there you are.
Hey, Mike, I have this great new poem. Check this out, man. Sometimes even our darkest moments are enlightening. Hey, what's so funny, man?
Nothing, Sergio, really. By the way, Norma Jean called.
Really? What did she want?
Oh, she was just telling me what a big fan she is of your poetry, Sergio. Sergio Lewis Body Shop at 3800 Admiral near the airport, where it's the customer's choice, not the insurance company's, and there's a lifetime warranty on all collision repair. 593-0191.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for having joined us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I've been your host, Andrew J. Polk. Out of time for this show, so I want to tell you briefly, we got coming up for you more discussion about, of course, what are some of the issues we're dealing with here in the Borderland, including with the food bank situation. More on that to come. And also, again, going to be announcing our election coverage, so stay tuned for that. And again, if you got a candidate out there who've had some visiting us here, we'll definitely be reaching out with it, y'all, and scheduling things. But in any case, thank you all so very much for having joined us here for the show. Airing live as well every Monday through Friday. So again, in the meantime, before we're back on live, stay safe out there. Look twice for motorcycles when out on the road, and have a great evening, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
10 eastbound is slow this afternoon, mainly because of a crash I-10 eastbound at Hawkins Boulevard exit involving 4 vehicles blocking the left lane, and there's a backup to the 54 Patriot with 11-minute delays, back-to-back bumper-to-bumper traffic. It's slow on the 10 eastbound from Trans Mountain down to the Patriot with 9-minute delays, and a minor accident reported on the Copia Street on-ramp to the I-10 westbound. It is on the right shoulder. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
Portions of the following program were pre-recorded.
News on the hour and a half. Traffic and weather all day. Keeping you informed and up to date. El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Titans go!
When the Teen Titans go to the movies, they know the best way to travel is safely.
Hollywood, here we come!
And you know it's super. To keep your child safe, be sure to use the right car seat for their age and size.
Exactly. We're finally on the big screen. Have a seat, my dude.
For more information on finding the right seat, visit nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
Gotcha. That's a wise move.
News on the hour and a half. Traffic and weather all day. News Radio 690 is KTSM AM El Paso, an iHeart radio station.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook.
Hurricane Ian is expected to remain intact as it travels across the peninsula, and hurricane warnings have been issued to Florida's east coast. Emergency officials will submit a disaster declaration asking the Department of Defense and the state for funding that would cover 100% of claims for the next 60 days for all counties. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell says the recovery process could possibly take years.
We have already brought teams in because we know this is going to be a complicated recovery. We have a federal interagency planning team already talking about what it's going to take to recover from this storm.
Governor Ron DeSantis said he appreciates the help from the Biden administration during this time of need. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster is declaring a state of emergency, although Ian is only projected to be a tropical storm when it reaches the coast of South Carolina on Friday. McMaster signed a declaration which activates the state's emergency operation plan. At least 6 people are injured after a shooting near a school in California. According to Oakland police, the shooting occurred at Sojourner Truth Independent Study School that teaches grades K through 12. 6 people were taken to local hospitals with gunshot wounds, with at least 3 of them in critical condition. Victims from the July 4th mass shooting in Highland Park, Illinois, are filing multiple lawsuits, including against the alleged shooter.